My name is Alec, and a few months ago, my partner Thrasher and I quit our high-paying VP level roles at a multi-billion-dollar tech company to branch out and start our own. Coming out of that leadership hole to actually write code ourselves again while we're building this product has made me realize just how monumental of a change AI is for this industry. So in this video, I'm going to be working up to the eventual point that I have of where I think software teams are going by simply telling you a story. The thing that spawned this entire chain of thought was actually the very first comment left on our YouTube channel by this guy here. We'll call him first commenter. And in our first video where we demoed our product, he basically commented saying that it's going to be replaced by a teenager and a coding agent in a weekend. The next day, Thrasher and I were on our daily meeting talking about this comment. And what we realized is we are that guy.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Okay.
I mean, obviously not the teenager part. We're both proudly a part of the first generation that's considered lame by both our parents and Gen Zers, millennials. But besides that, I was that guy who in college, instead of going to parties, would go to 24-hour hackathons where you had 24 hours to write code and build a product from scratch and had to demo it at the end. In fact, I actually won one of these hackathons back in my senior year of college. We actually beat out a Stanford team who was super salty about it and made it just that much better of a victory for us. And also, I'm kidding, I did actually go to parties in college, and that's probably why I'm a vibe coder now. Thrasher, on the other hand, is a real engineer who is completely 100% self-taught, and he's pretty much considered by every engineer we've ever worked with the best engineer that they've ever worked with.
Hey everyone, I'm Thrasher. Alec asked me to make a clip introducing myself. I just try to make sure none of Alec's bugs make it to production.
Not to mention, we have both been founding engineers at multiple startups, meaning we've essentially been chained to our desk and asked to build the initial product over the course of a few months. With all that said, I do actually have a point. Now, building this product from scratch, but using AI, I'm realizing just how monumental of a shift AI is for the software world. Yes, I know AI writing code is old news at this point, but I'm now realizing so much more intimately than just simply reading all those posts on Twitter. And I really wanted to make a video just sharing this experience. So per the point of first commenter, AIs are incredibly good at helping you build an MVP. The work that I used to do as a founding engineer back in the good old days before AI is the same amount of work that I can get done now in a single day. And I don't say that to try and exaggerate or be a fearmonger. That is the actual reality of my experience as a vibe coder. Vibe coders are the term for people who use AI exclusively to write their software, and they have a pretty bad connotation among real software engineers right now, which makes sense because in 10 years or so, software engineering is going the way of carriage drivers in the Industrial Revolution, and I'm a little bit salty about it too. At the start of my day, I would literally pull up Cursor, type in the entirety of the feature that I want to build for that day. And then over the course of somewhere between 30 minutes and a few hours, I can just type in more prompts to shepherd the AI to build that feature for me. The best concrete example I have of how powerful using AI is to write code was just a few days ago when I was building the address lookup feature into Lumix. I went into Cursor, typed in my prompt saying, I want to build address lookup, I want to do this and that, etc., pressed enter. It spent about 5 to 10 minutes doing different Google searches, going to my code base, grepping for different things, getting the full context of what it needed to build this feature. And in about 10 minutes of just me sitting there scrolling Instagram Reels, it spit out a 90% perfect address lookup feature. And yes, this is a pretty simple feature in the grand scheme of things, but guys, an address lookup feature where you type an address in, it does a API search to Mapbox to get the preview list of search results, which then you can click on, and then it automatically pans the map, puts the marker on the map, gives you an address info box on the bottom, all built on top of the same architecture that we've already built our app in. That was incredible to me. AI is not in a place today to replace software engineering. Vibe coding is essentially only as good as the bounds that it's working within. And the real problem is that it's kind of self-degradating. I don't know the right term for that, but basically the more AI code that you put in, the worse and worse your application gets over time. So your 100% vibe coded application right now may look good. You may be able to click on things and think that it's working, but I guarantee you it's going to have massive security holes and it's not going to be able to scale to even like a reasonable amount of users. And these are things that a lot of like non-technical founders are like, oh, I don't care. That doesn't matter. It does matter. I promise you. This is a different level of bad than creating all that tech debt early on in order to move quickly that you can then kind of work your way out of over the years to come as your company grows. Thankfully, at our business, we have the boundary setter. You guessed it. That's Thrasher. At this point, his title should probably be Chief Vibe Code Wrangler or something like that. And without Thrasher doing the hard stuff so that I could go in and vibe code, auto-generate like 75% of the code with AI, we would not have a real application, especially not in the world of digital forensics, law enforcement, where like security is a really, really important thing. Another concrete example to put it in perspective, I was not able to go in and write or vibe code a single line of code until Thrasher spent about 2 to 3 weeks doing a ton of research on all the modern tech stacks, building the initial code base, the foundational architecture, setting up the initial data model, and getting the initial like data pipeline working all the way from the back end to the UI. And trust me, Thrasher is really good at writing AI generated code too. AI in its current state just simply doesn't have a good holistic sense of a large problem and ability to generate that automatically. You really have to give it a specific task and then shepherd it to the finish line. But I do want to get to the actual point of this video. So I think that the future of software teams for at least the next like 3 to 5 years before AI just completely takes over is going to consist of 2 types of people: architects and vibe coders. Thrasher's basically been doing all of the hard stuff, all the architecture, laying the groundwork, and I have been going into this and just vibe coding the shit out of all of our features. So when a new company is small and it still needs to build a lot of things, I think a ratio of 1 architect to 1 vibe coder is the right amount. Specifically, exactly 1 architect and 1 vibe coder. At least until you have like 100K in revenue, you are definitely doing it wrong with more than 1 engineer and 1 vibe coder. If you can find 1 person who can do both the architecting and the vibe coding, good on you. But they really are 2 completely separate mentalities, and it's probably pretty rare to find somebody who can do both those things. But the reason this works so well is because while the architect is working on the next frontier, building out the scaffolding for like the next set of features, the vibe coder can go absolutely ham in the current architecture, building any features they can possibly think of. And then by the time the architect finishes that next thing, the vibe coder has another chunk of features that they can go ham in. You really get this nice yin and yang back and forth. You can make a ton of progress for the point of first commenter. But as a software product grows, it becomes more mature, it goes into that product market fit, more into the growth stages, you actually tend to run out of the like crankability, the ability to just yeet features into the code base nonstop, and you get more into the hardcore engineering challenges, things that really only high level, like experienced software engineers can solve. And so I think as a team grows, you actually need a ratio of less vibe coders and you need a ratio of more architects. Also, a single vibe coder can make so much progress that you really don't need a lot of them. In fact, it could hurt you having too many of them. I haven't really talked about what I mean when I say vibe coder and architect. So let's start with architect. When I say that, I don't mean explicitly people who have the actual title software architect. What I do mean is somebody who has the deep engineering skill set to lay the groundwork for a large application and do it in a way that works well. That's probably like a big jumble of words that don't make sense, but you could have a really simple app that just says hello world in the browser if you just like write a couple of lines of HTML, or you can have that same app that just says hello world in the browser, but the hello world came from a JSON file that was processed through a data pipeline that got stored into a database that went over a GraphQL API into the browser, into your front-end data management, into a React app, and then eventually presented hello world in the browser. And if you're going to make a real software product, you're gonna need the latter to build that product on top of. And the type of people who can build that second product, those are the architects. So there's a percentage of existing senior software engineers that have the chops to be able to do this kind of work. And then pretty much anybody staff level and above is probably going to qualify as what I consider an architect. And then on the vibe coder side, this is really akin to what I think today people are calling the product engineer. The vibe coder needs to have enough knowledge of software engineering to kind of get their hands dirty, write code, understand what the code does. But the core skill set of a vibe coder needs to be the ability to make a product that people actually want to use. Like a product manager, but one that can actually critically think. So it's way more focused on things like making a UI that looks good, a user experience that makes sense to people, and a set of features and functionality that solve a problem for the users that you're trying to sell it to. As with existing software engineering, I do think that you're going to have architects and vibe coders that specialize in individual verticals of those two core skill sets. But at the end of the day, I think the vibe coder and the architect are the two things that you're going to need to have an effective software team. So yes, this new era is going to eliminate all of the junior, mid-level, and many of the senior engineers who are not focused on either the core skill set of the vibe coder, building products people want, or the deep engineering, hard problem-solving skill. In the meantime, when we make enough money to start hiring, I think we're going to start with sales.